Welcome to another episode of the Sequestered Chef. I don't know about you, but this is starting my 9th week of staying at home, and I'm so happy that I've been able to invite you into my home and visit with you, and you can be in my kitchen and we can talk about healthy eating options. And so we can take this time to just think about what we want our next chapter of life and health and wellness to look like once we all get to go out and about again. So if you're new to the Sequestered Chef series, I'm Scarlett Farr, and I'm the owner of Fitter by Far. I provide basic nutrition seminars as well as meal prep seminars. I am an ACE certified group fitness instructor, and I teach at the Wellness Center and also the Mercy University Employee Wellness Program. In addition, I'm certified with SCW as an active aging movement coach, and I have some nutrition certifications there, as well as I'm finishing the ACE Sports Nutrition Specialist program. So hopefully that will be done soon. You know the old saying, sugar and spice and everything nice. Well, last week we talked about spices, so I thought this week we should talk about sugar. But I'm gonna tell you a little secret that sugar is really not that nice for us. In fact, I have so much to say about sugar that this is going to be a two-part. So we're going to talk about sugar just in our day-to-day foods and cooked items, and then the second part is going to be talking about sugar in liquid form, such as in our energy drinks and sweet tea or Cokes, that kind of stuff, and why that sugar is even more dangerous to our bodies than just the regular amounts of sugar and you probably don't even have a clue how much sugar you're eating because it is in everything. There's this book that I wanted to tell you about. It's called Salt, Sugar, and Fat. And this book will terrify you and make you mad all at the same time when you find out just how much sugar, fat, and salt is put into our diet and our processed foods for no other reason than to make it so irresistible that you just keep going back for more. It has no health reason to be in our food supply, and so that book just kind of breaks down what's going on in the food industry and how we've all been manipulated to be more unhealthy as the decades have gone by. So earlier this year, I was a co-presenter with a friend of mine, Daryl Andrews, who owns the Healthy Grocery Store Tour. And we were doing a series of classes at the Wellness Center called the Nutrition Summit 2020. And some of y'all might have attended that. Unfortunately, the virus shut everything down before we got too far into the series. And unfortunately, before we got to roll out our 10-day sugar reset. So we have to get that up and running as soon as we can after everything opens back up and the grocery stores get fully stocked, so that we can send you to the grocery store to buy some things without feeling guilty that we sent you out into the world. But if after this video you decide that maybe resetting your sugar intake is something you want to do, you can certainly reach out to me now on Facebook at my Fitter by Far page, or you can send me an email at fitterbyfar@gmail.com and just let me know you're interested in the program, and as soon as we can get that started back up, I'll let you know and give you the details about it. So I have another fun Fitter by Far fun fact for you. I had some fun facts last week in the spice video, and this one is also about Christopher Columbus. Remember, my fun fact last week was how how spices affected the political and commercial trade back in his time in the late 1400s, and how he was actually looking for spices when he stumbled across the Americas. Well, this week's fun fact about Christopher Columbus is sugar related. So on his second trip back to the Americas, he took sugarcane so that it could be grown in the New World, because Europe had fallen in love with sugar just like we have, and they needed some more ways to produce it. So he brought it to the Americas to grow, and then they would take it back to Europe. Then later on in the early 1800s, British ships set up a blockade against France. And one of the things that happened was they cut off the sugarcane supply for the French. But there were some industrious entrepreneurs there, and they quickly figured out how to turn sugar or beets into sugar. So for most of the time up until the early 1970s, the sugar came from two sources, sugarcane or beets. And then in the 1970s, the wonderful high fructose corn syrup was invented. And it came about as a way to use up the surplus corn supply that farmers, they just had grown too much of it, and it was so cheap, and there needed to be a way to deal with that. And so high fructose corn syrup was born, and you might have heard of it, but it is not a good kind of sugar, and we're going to talk about that. Maybe not in this video, but we'll definitely talk about it in part 2 when we talk about liquid sugar, because that's where we see a lot more of it. So before we get too far into talking about sugar, I wanted to give you an example of how much sugar you should have every day. So the American Heart Association recommends that for men, they have 9 teaspoons a day at maximum. So each one of these is just a half of a teaspoon. So that's what a man's serving of sugar a day looks like. All right, this is what a woman's amount of sugar a day looks like. And depending on how old you are, as a child, you're either that much or this much. So that really doesn't mean anything to you without a reference point. So a 1 can of soda has 11. So that's 9 teaspoons of sugar. 1 can of Coke has 11 teaspoons of sugar. So that blew even the man's diet. Those little yogurts, sweet yogurts that people eat for breakfast a lot of times, the little small containers, this is how much sugar just that one container has. So if you're a woman and that's what you're eating for breakfast, you've already blown your sugar budget for the day. And you probably didn't just eat the yogurt, you probably ate something else that might have been sweet. So right off the bat, you've got a problem. So let's talk about some other things that have sugar. Some things you might not even know. Ketchup. Did you know ketchup has sugar in it? So for 1 tablespoon of ketchup, it's this much sugar is in 1 tablespoon. So 1 teaspoon. And who eats 1 tablespoon of ketchup, really? So what about a Monster drink? A lot of people will chug one of these down in no time. That has this much sugar. So I'm going to put that right here on the end, and you can see that's almost a woman's daily amount of sugar just in that one drink. Then we have, what about, a lot of people hear about kombucha and they think it's healthy, but it's all sugar, just tons of sugar. So that has this much sugar in it. And salad dressing, who knew and why? Just salad dressing. Why does it have sugar in it? Because that's the only way we're going to eat it. And it has this much sugar in it. So you can kind of see. You can't really see exactly, but you can get an idea. That's a lot of sugar for a serving. And a serving of this is actually a light one. 2 tablespoons of this dressing. And that brings me to another point. When you see low fat or light, and it sounds like it's healthy, really when they take the fat out, and the book that I showed you a while ago would tell you more about that. But when they take this fat out, they replace it with sugar because it still has to be tasty. And food manufacturers know that there's some combination of fat, sugar, and salt to make everything delicious. So they just play with the amounts of all 3 of those until they get it just right. So if there's fat missing, there's sugar added. You can just be guaranteed of that. So as a population, we eat 3 to 6 times more a day in sugar than those allowances that I just showed you. And that comes out to about, on average, about 60 pounds of sugar a year. So an obvious way that we consume a lot of sugar is in our desserts. So today I want to give you some bacon options without sugar, or 2 of them actually don't even have sugar alternatives for you to try. You can find these recipes at Fitter by Far on Pinterest, and it'll be, for those of you that have watched these videos, you know I make a Pinterest page for every video that I make, and so I think this one is called Sugar on Your Lips but Not Your Hips. And then but I did notice that when I had a hard time picking out recipes for all this time, because in the narratives, as Pinterest often has, that goes with the recipe. You know, you have to read for 15 paragraphs before you actually get to the recipe. It talks about how healthy it is and how wonderful it is, and then you get down to the actual recipe and it's got junk in it, a lot of sugar. So just remember when you're looking at them, they're not some of them aren't the best choices, but they're better choices than just eating pure sugar. But you can always take half of the amount of sugar out of a recipe and it really won't materially change it. It'll be better for you, but it doesn't change the way it cooks. And some things have sugar alternatives. You can even reduce some of that if you want to try. And before we talk about that, sugar comes in lots of different names. There's it's up to about 60 different names for sugar. But I have this chart, which I know you can't read it, but those are all the names for sugar. You've got agave syrup, maltitol, alcohol sugar, sorbitol, xylitol is a sugar alternative, beet sugar, cane syrup, chicory extract, corn syrup, corn sweetener, high fructose corn syrup that we talked about a while ago, malt, maltodextrin, maltose, maple sugar, glucose, lactose, sucrose, saccharose, actually anything that ends in ose, processed fruit, fruit juice, concentrate, raw sugar, table sugar, turbinado sugar, barley malt syrup, rice syrup. That's just some of the words that are on here. So you really don't, unless you are very good at reading an ingredient label, you really don't probably know exactly how much sugar you're getting. One of the tricks that the food industry does is on a food label, they have to put the most concentration of each ingredient on the food label in order. So a lot of times if it's bread, the first ingredient you'll see is sweet, obviously. But for sugar, they can put 3 different kinds of sugar in it and it drops all 3 of them way down the list so you don't realize how much sugar, because if it was just one kind of sugar, it might be the first or second ingredient in a product. But because they put 3 different kinds of sugar in, then they can drop those names way down the list and you might not even realize that it's sugar. So that's just another way. You would learn that in that book that I just showed you. And I want to show you how you find how much sugar. This is a food label, and starting in January, all food manufacturers had to change to this new label. And one of the things that the new label does is breaks down, it has to list how much of the sugar in the product is an added sugar. So you're just always going to look for that line. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But this is how you find out how much sugar is actually been put into your product. And so when you're counting how many teaspoons, this is what you're going to go and look for. And you just need to remember that 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon. So you're going to have to do a little bit of math. There's a reason they don't want you to know what you're reading. So you have to do math a lot of times to figure out what you've got with a food label. But just remember 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. So for the man, if he can have 9 teaspoons a day, that's 36 grams. Okay, so back to the recipes on Pinterest. I made 3 of them for you to take a look at. I want to show you some things that you can use instead of sugar, and it will also increase your fruits and vegetables. You should eat a good variety of fruits and vegetables in your diet every day, and adding fruits or vegetables as the sweetener in your baked goods is one way to get that in. So a lot of times you can substitute bananas. Some people think the bananas are the devil. They are not the devil. You just can't eat tons of them. And the more brown spots they have, the sweeter they get because they're getting more ripe. So the browner it is, the more sugar it has. Another way to sweeten is with a sweet potato. You just cook the sweet potato in the microwave or however you're going to use it, and then you just add it to some recipes. And one of my recipes has bananas and sweet potatoes in it. Another thing that will sweeten instead of sugar is applesauce. And I actually make my own applesauce. So these are organic apples. I just bought 4 of them. I put them in, I peel them and cut them up, take the core out of them, pop them in a crock pot, sprinkle them with cinnamon, and cook them for about 4 hours on high. And it makes the best applesauce. So you could just eat it as applesauce, or you could use it in some of these recipes. That way, if you use organic apples, especially in the fall, if you go apple picking and you use those, it's going to be really delicious as a good substitute for sugar. You can also, if you're cooking something with chocolate, you can use this brand, Lily's brand of chocolate chips. I've talked about this in other videos. This actually uses stevia, which is a sugar alternative, but it's one of the better ones. So if you're trying to cut your sugar out, but you've just got to have something sweet and chocolatey, this is the way to go. Another very popular thing that is used instead of sugar are dates. But I want to tell you, make sure that you get the ones called pitted, because if you don't, you're going to regret it. Always look for the pitted ones. I use this in one of the recipes as well. Let's see, some other things I want to tell you. Truvia is a stevia. And this one, there's something called monk fruit. This is a mixture of stevia and monk fruit. That's another, it's a newer sugar alternative, but it seems like it's going to be a healthier choice than, you know, some of those other pink or yellow packets that you can find on dining tables in restaurants. So you might, if you're wanting to cut away from sugar and you're not quite ready to go the fruits and vegetables sweetening way, you might want to look into these. And then I want to talk about avocados and zucchinis. Avocados aren't necessarily sweet, but they add a creaminess because, you know, this is the good fats that we talk about. But it adds a creaminess to your recipes. So the mousse that I'm going to show you actually was made with avocado. And zucchini doesn't add sweetness, but it adds moisture to the recipe. So it gives it a better taste. So you might want to grate up some zucchini sometimes, or look for recipes like that. This was another thing that I used in the mousse recipe that I'm going to show you, and it's on the Pinterest page. But what I wanted to tell you, there's all kinds of coconut cream and milk. There's coconut milk that comes in a cardboard box. There's some, these are over in the international section. Some of them are coconut milk or light coconut milk. So if you can find the light, always use that in a recipe. But there's also coconut cream. There's this one, which if you look on the label, it has basically no sugar. And then there's the other one that is used for pina coladas, and it's full of sugar. So you don't want to accidentally get that one if you're going to make the avocado mousse recipe, because this is the one you're looking for. I think that takes care of all the sugar alternatives for our baking. So I made 3 things. I made chocolate avocado mousse, and then I made, and that one again had dates as the sweetener. I made a coffee cake, and it used stevia as the sweetener. And I made brownies, and those had sweet potatoes and bananas as the sweetener. And I'll show you what the finished products of those. Okay, this is the chocolate mousse that I made with avocado and coconut cream that has no extra sugar in it either, and some dates for sweetening. And this is the final product of the brownies made with sweet potatoes and bananas as the only sweeteners. You know what? You might find out that what you're craving isn't really the sugar, but the chocolate. If you're somebody that really loves dark chocolate, then these might be just the thing for you. They're not terribly sweet, but they definitely satisfy that dark chocolate taste that you're craving. And last but not least, still warm out of the oven, is the cinnamon coffee cake, which this one was sweetened with stevia. So the others were used fruits or vegetables. This one used the sugar alternative. So again, I'm going to break this into 2 parts. I was going to talk to you about the liquid sugar, but this video is going to get too long if I do that. But I just want to say that if this beginning talk about sugar has been something that has intrigued you, you can go and read a lot about it. The information is a little bit confusing about exactly what sugar does to you, but in the second part of this video, I'm going to try to break it down a little bit more. I'm an accounting nerd, not a science nerd, so it has been a challenge to read some of the stuff, but if you read it a few times, you don't have to wait on me in the next video. You can go ahead and start reading about it, And if you read through it a couple of times or you read a couple of different articles about it, it starts making sense. And then you can decide for yourself if it's time for you to try to back off the sugar. But I will challenge you this, to try 3 days and go with the 9 teaspoons if you're a guy, the 6 teaspoons if you're a woman, and then for your kids, try to reduce that. If they're very young, they don't need but 3 teaspoons. And just see, just try to add up during the day how much you are eating. And then when we get to the second video and I get a little bit more into it, you'll know kind of where you stand with that. I think you're going to be shocked. When Daryl and I first did our nutrition summit, I thought, because that was Daryl's part to talk about, and I thought, I got this. I'm very good at it. And even as conscious as I am most of the time, I was way off. And so it took me about 3 days to get rid of my sugar intake to the point, and get new things in my pantry that were good substitutes. And I can tell you 2 things that I noticed, or 3 things that I noticed right off the bat. My belly was flatter so it took me about 3 days to get it completely under the 20 or under the 6 teaspoons for a woman. My belly was flatter. I was sleeping so much better, and my skin looked so clear, and I already have pretty clear skin, but it just had a creamy complexion that I had not had before. So between now and the next video that I do, go ahead and give it a try, experiment and see what happens. You might find it's easy. You might be one of those people that like salt more than sugar, and you really aren't eating a lot of sugar, but I think you'll be surprised because it is in everything. And just start reading your labels. If you have any questions, you can go to my Facebook page and send me a message at fitterbyfar, or you can email me at fitterbyfar@gmail. And if you're ready to start working on the sugar reduction and you don't quite know what to do, or you need a coach, or you just need some cheerleading, go ahead and give me a call. If I can't help you, I'll put you in touch with Daryl, and he can try to help you with it as well. And I guess I'll see you on the next video, and we'll talk about sugary drinks next time. So have a good rest of a week, and I will see you next time. Thank you for joining.